guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be making some wooden toy wheels. Well, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking this guy Kenny has lost his marbles. What's the deal with wooden toy wheels? There's a lot of woodworkers out there, myself included, that make wooden models or wooden toys. And most of them, I'm gonna say, go out and purchase the hardware. Things like the steering wheels, the axle pegs, the wheels are a big one. And I don't know, I don't really like them. I've never purchased them, I always make my own. And I thought it might be a good opportunity to show you guys how to make your own for those of you who end up purchasing these things. Now, if you followed my fire truck build online, these are the wheels that I made for the fire truck, and you may see them referred to as highway tires or highway wheels. And they are for purchase. Let's make our own and stop purchasing these factory-built ones from the stores. So the first place that we're going to start off with is choosing your stock. Well, you can choose whatever species of wood that you like. I would personally stay away from the softwoods, things like pine and cedar, that sort of thing. They don't really lend themselves to taking the detail of these particular wheels. For my choice, just to make them a darker wood, I prefer walnut. And you want a piece that's 3/4 of an inch thick. Now, the finished dimensions of these wheels are going to be 3/4 of an inch thick, and they're going to be 2 3/4 of an inch in diameter. But you want to start off with a bigger wheel than that because we spin them down on the lathe. So for starters, you want to mark off sections of wood that are at least 3 to 3.5, I would go 3.5 inches wide. So I'm going to mark off squares here, 3.5 inches across. Now you're also going to want to mark the center of each of these 3.5 inch blocks, and that will be for the starting or the beginning drilling of these. So at the center point here, we're going to mark and center punch the middle of each of these blocks. Now that you've got all those center marks punched and laid out, you want to set a Forstner bit into your drill press. It'll be an 1.25 inch diameter Forstner bit, and you want to drill each one of these center marks to a depth of 3/8 of an inch. Now the purpose for this is later on in making the wheels, that 1.25 inch diameter hole, that's going to house the hubs of these tires. But this will be the first step. Drill that 1.25 inch hole 3/8 of an inch deep. Something I will point out here before we start drilling is if you have the ability or the capability on your drill press where you have a drill press table, it's very beneficial to set up your fence to coincide with the center mark that you've punched. The reason for that is, for starters, when we actually cut the outer diameter of the wheels, it helps us to hold everything steady. As well, it makes it so that on the board, all of the center holes are consistent. And if you accidentally, let's say, punch something or made it a little off center, when you go to do the second stage of drilling, which you'll see next, the fence will help you correct that. You don't want a wheel where you drill one stage at one center hole and then you're a little off on the second stage of drilling and it makes your wheel wobble. It's not a very good thing to have happen. So assist yourself by setting up a fence. If you don't have one on your drill press table, clamp a board down onto your original drill press table to help or to act as a fence. And that'll go a long way to making sure all the wheels get centered properly. Now that we have the first hole drilled, I'm just going to check it to make sure that my depth is correct. And if it's not, I'll make the adjustments and then we'll carry on and drill the rest of them. Okay, the next step that you want to do is you want to get a knuckle buster. And if you don't know what a knuckle buster is, it's one of these, also known as a circle cutter. And keep your hands away from this guy, fellas. I call it a knuckle buster for a reason. When that thing hits, it hurts. Bottom line here, you want to set it to cut a circle of about 3 inches. It's not imperative. Don't go too small. Don't go less than 3, but if you're at 3 1/8 or whatever, that's fine too, because we're going to fine tune them on the lathe. Bottom line here is set this up for about 3 inches, and then using your fence that you set up to do the Forstner holes at 1 1/4 inches, use that setup to help you hold the board and drill out all of your wheels now. You want to drill halfway through on one side, flip your board over, and then come at it from the other side. You'll get a much cleaner cut that way, and it's a lot easier to remove it from the actual circle cutter. If you don't have a circle cutter or knuckle buster, you could use a 3-inch hole saw. Whatever you like. Same method though. Halfway through, flip the board, halfway through again. It'll go a long way to getting a much cleaner cut, not so much burning. And guys, put that drill press speed down as low as she'll go for this. It's not a race. You don't want to burn through it, you want to cut it. And there we have our first cut tire. Not finished by any means, but the first 2 steps are done. So I'm going to cut all the rest of them, and then we're going to carry on with the next step. Hopefully you noticed in that last segment how far away my hands were from that knuckle buster. And as well, there's no clamping there because that fence really goes a long way to helping hold that board for you. If you feel better clamping it down, then do it. There's nothing wrong with that. A little extra help never hurt. So go drill the rest of your tires there, guys. Well, now that you've got all the tires cut on the drill press, it's time to put them on the lathe. But how do you mount them? And for that, all I've done is I took a 1/4 inch diameter bolt. In this case, it's a 1/4 20 thread. And you can see here, I cut the head off of it. It's 2 inches long, and with a couple of 1/4 inch fender washers and some lock washers and some 1/4 20 nuts, I've essentially made a mandrel for turning these wheels. And on the one end, I'll just show you a close-up here, I've center punched it so that my live tailstock can go into that and hold it firmly while turning. So Let's head over to the lathe and I'll show you how to chuck up these wheels, and then we can turn them down to their final dimension of 2 3/4 of an inch. If you're wondering why we just didn't set the circle cutter to 2 3/4 of an inch right from the get-go, have a look at the edges of this thing here. The circle cutter does a nice job, but it is not a clean edge whatsoever. There is some burning. There's the edges where there's some tear out where your two cuts are joining from the sides of the board. And I prefer just to make it a little bigger and then turn it down to get that clean edge so that you're starting fresh right from the get-go when you go to add the treads and that sort of thing. So let's head over to the lathe, and like I said, I'll show you guys how to chuck it up. So over at the lathe here, we have a drill chuck in the headstock of the lathe, and we have our little mandrill that we made, and I'm just going to place this little mandrill into our chuck just like that. And we'll just get our chuck key here. Somebody forgot to get it. There it is, right in the drawer where it belongs. And we're just going to tighten this in. Now, you don't have to do this next step, but I do have a little 1/4 nut right there as a jam chuck. And I do like to give it a little twist just to jam it up against that, up against the drill chuck. The next step I like to do is you get your wheel on there. So just give it a little push on there, and you'll see how nicely that goes right over top of that fender washer. Get your lock washers on the other side and give it a little bit of a tighten. Now, you don't really have to crank these down. It's not necessary to crank them too badly. Just a little bit of a snug little fit there to keep it from spinning out. And then where you've punched that 1/4 bolt, you can bring your tailstock right up and just tighten it in there, and you're ready to go. So let's turn these down now to their final dimension of 2 3/4 inches in diameter. And keep checking it, guys. Make sure that you're not making them too big. You want them all the same. So take your time, no rush. Turn them down to 2 3/4 of an inch. So you've got the wheel down to 2 3/4 of an inch, and you can now remove your tailstock out of the end of it here, only because we need to work a little bit on the profile on this outer edge of the tire. And what we want to do is put a little lip 1/32 of an inch in, or out, I guess, from the center on this edge here. The same here on the outer edge. And then round the outside of the tire. Now this is on the side where you've drilled this 1 1/4 inch diameter Forstner bit hole. It's a little difficult to explain, so what I'll do is I'll turn this and then I'll show you the tire, what it looks like, and that will hopefully explain what it is that I've just said with a visual aid. Well, hopefully this will assist you in what I was saying. We've turned a flat ridge right here. I said 1/32. I went a little deeper because I thought that's what I would like. And there's another flat ridge here on the inside where the rim goes. Then you just want to slightly round this profile of the tire to give it that, well, not so harsh look. You know, it's a tire. It's not a block of wood, or it's supposed to be a tire. So once you get that little profile turn there, then you can give it a nice sanding and soften up these edges, and that is the outside edge of the tire completed. Now we just need to work on these treads. Well, we're going to mark the treads for this, and what we're going to do, because we've brought this notch here in, we've lost some of our 3/4 of an inch here. Not much, we lost a 1/16. So we're going to come in a 1/16 from either edge and put a mark at 1/8 inch increments, and that will give us 5 lines across this tire. From there, I'm just going to use my skew chisel and just carve them in ever so carefully, and then we're going to round this outer edge here. This will actually be the inside edge of the wheel, so it will be a little less sharp on that edge. Then we're going to give the whole thing a sanding, but let's start with marking our treads. So turn your lathe down to a nice low speed, and like I said, come in a 1/16 of an inch for your first one, and then 1/8 of an inch over for each one after that. And you should end up with a nice tread pattern there. Just like that. Hopefully you can see that well on the camera. And it's just a matter of taking your skew chisel. I'm going to use my miniature skew because it's a little more forgiving. And I'm just going to mark these lines here. Like that. Now you'll notice how careful I'm being putting those in. I'm still at the low speed, but I'm now going to turn the speed up a bit on the lathe, deepen them a bit, make them more of a V groove, and finish up the turning on this particular tire. And then bevel the other side of the tread. And lastly, as I said, you just want to round off this inner edge here. Just give it a little bit of a better shape than that square blocky one that we've got there now. I'm going to give this a little bit of a shaping too, because I can see that it's a little too square for my liking. And now the last step here, of course, is just give this a good sanding. And there we have our first tire done. Now this is not the rim as well, this is just the tire. So turn all the rest of them, get them ready to go, and then come back and see me, and we're going to show you how to do the rims and get them in place. I've got all of the wheels turned that I need for my project, and if you've ever bought the ones online, you can see that these are pretty much identical. The difference is they're handmade by you and they're walnut or whatever species you want. You're not limited to what they offer. So less money for the company that makes them, more money for you to buy new tools or materials. We'll just do a quick recap here of the process. So remember, it starts off with 1.25 inch hole diameter, 3/8 of an inch deep in a 3/4 inch thick block of wood. Then from there we used a knuckle buster or circle cutter, and we cut ourselves a 3-inch or thereabouts. We were a little larger than that, but roughly 3-inch size hole, cutting halfway through the front and then flipping the wood over and halfway through the back. From there, we made our little mandrel out of a 1/4 inch bolt that was 2 inches long. In order to mount these on the lathe, we turned our outer diameter down to 2 3/4 inches. Once we got that done, we did our little grooves. I've actually found it better to do the threads first. So you want to put 5 threads starting 1/16 of an inch in from the back of the tire, and then space them 1/8 of an inch all the way across to get those put in. Then you want to, once you're happy with those and you've grooved them out nicely, you want to turn to the front of your tire or the outside of your tire, and you want to put a little edge here on the inside of this hole and on the outside to define your sidewall and shape the sidewall with some curves to give it that 3-dimensional kind of tire look. From there, give it a good sanding, and I use a bunch of the chips or the shavings of the walnut at a higher speed, and I burnish all the tires to give them a little bit of a sheen. That sheen you see on there is from burnishing. That's not from sandpaper. Gives it a nice little sheen. So there's your recap on how to turn these tires, and I think now we're going to move on to what to do about the rims. Well, like I said, it's time to start the rims. And in order to drill and cut and shape the rims, etc., you need to make a jig. And the jig is a simple one. You'll mark a center hole, and you'll mark a circumference of 1 1/4 inches around, just like this. And at equal parts, just like that, you will drill a hole. But these holes will be 72 degrees apart, each one. The first thing you want to do I would make this out of like a 3/4 MDF, but what you want to do is this 1 1/4 inch hole now, drill it with a Forstner bit 3/8 of an inch deep. But before you do that, drill each one of these holes. These holes will be a 3/8 diameter hole, and they'll be a through hole. So 5 3/8 diameter through holes. Once you get those 5 drilled, then drill this 1 1/4 inch Forstner bit hole 3/8 of an inch deep. And finally, once you're done that, you will drill this center hole, which will be a 1/4 inch hole. Now that may seem a little bit confusing to some of you, but really it's not that bad, because this is what you end up with. You end up with your 3/8 inch holes, your 1 1/4 inch hole, and your 1/4 inch hole in the middle. There's the back, and of course the front. Now, with this particular jig, this is what's going to help you drill your rims or your hubcaps or whatever you want to call them. So at this point now, we're going to need some 3/8 inch thick maple, which is what we're going to be making our hubcaps or our rims out of, and we are going to need to go over to the lathe and spin some 1 1/4 inch discs out of that. Now, luckily, with our mandrel that we made, those fender washers are actually 1 1/4 inch. So for us, it's lucky that we just basically turn until we hit our washer and we have the proper size. So I don't think you need a video of turning some circles. I'll turn a couple of those and then come back and see you. Well, we have our 1.25 inch discs turned, and they're 3/8 of an inch thick, as I said. The first step here is to get some double-sided tape on the back of your disc, and this is going to help you to hold it so that the alignment remains the same while you're drilling this rim. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time remembering the word rim, but anyway. Okay, so you get your double-sided tape on there, and I've got a couple places there where it's hanging over the edges, and that's going to cause some problems. So you just want to trim that off and make sure that it's not going to interfere, because it is a fairly tight fit going into this particular jig. Now, don't discount using double-sided tape to hold things. I use it quite a bit in my shop, especially for things like this where you just can't get in there to hold it. So put your disc in there, and you can give it a little tap with a mallet or whatever you like, and give that double-sided tape a little time to set up. You want to really let that adhere in there. Once you're done, we're going to take a 1/4 inch dowel, and it doesn't have to be a good dowel, but we're going to drive it down through the middle, and that as well is going to help us to keep all the alignment in place. Once we get that done, we're going to head over to the drill press, install a 3/8 of an inch bit, and we're going to start drilling this, and I'm going to show you how to do it. We've got our maple disc, 1.25 inch in diameter, 3/8 thick, into our jig with double-sided tape and that dowel that we drove in, that 1/4 inch dowel into the middle, and we flush cut it here so that it's not getting in our way. Now we want to turn the whole thing over so that our holes are exposed at the top, and you're going to use this as a drilling template. Now, I'll give you a piece of advice here. You may want to make extra discs. Don't just make what you need, because sometimes that double-sided tape lets go, the thing spins, you don't get a proper drill, etc., etc. But we're going to try it here and see how we make out. You want to line your 3/8 bit up with the holes that you drilled earlier in your jig and drill right through to the other side, and hopefully it won't twist. Just like that. Now the secret here is to go slow. So drill all 5 3/8 holes, and then when you're done that, come back and see me. Well, truth be known, it started to twist on me and got a little out of alignment. So what I've done is driven a 3/8 rod into the first hole I drilled, and that will definitely keep it from spinning at this point in time, and we can carry on with the other 3 holes that I have left. See, even I can learn something from these videos with a different method. So live and learn. Drill your first 3/8, drive a 3/8 dowel into there as kind of a keeper, and carry on. I'll see you when you're done. When it's all said and done and you remove it from the jig, you should have something that looks like this. And we're going to take it back over to the lathe. We're going to mount it up, and we're going to taper these outside edges now. Bring it down to 1/4 inch thick on the outer rim. So you'll start off at 3/8 in the middle and taper it down to 1/4 inch thick. So I'm going to get that done, and then I'll come back and show you how it looks at that point. Now when you're done shaping that rim, you should end up with something that looks just like this. And of course, once you glue it into your tire that we turned earlier, you end up with something that looks like this. Pretty spectacular, eh? Wasn't all that difficult at all. And the more you do, the better you get. So, I don't know. I think it's pretty awesome, and I think maybe you guys might want to give this one a whirl. And there you have it. Making toy wheels for your models instead of buying the commercially available ones. Guys, you can't tell me that this doesn't look better than the ones you get from the store. This thing is spectacular. Now you could take it one step further. If you say you had some ebony wood, you can make the tire black, which would be awesome. I don't have any. I really like walnut, so that's what I use. But anyway, it's a very simple process, and it just takes some planning, some careful drilling. Just take your time. Use a set of calipers to take your measurements on the lathe, making sure that everything works out just fine. Guys, this show may not be for everyone. It may not be one of those things that applies to everybody, but I know that there's those of you out there that will find this information useful and will appreciate the show. So guys, I want to thank you for tuning in again this week, and I'm going to see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.